the conclusion that we reached and closed without naming names or anything. And then, yeah, so that was the discussion we were having, because otherwise we don't have to broadcast like the however long time that we're in closed session, you know?
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so I show that it is 6 o'clock. So I'd like to call the meeting to order here at 6 p.m. Ms. Shope, may I have a roll call, please?
Wong.
Here.
Levy.
Here.
Delgado.
Present.
Jacobs.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Miller.
Present.
I show all members present virtually.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the agenda? All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. So that brings us to our discussion and action items. So the very first order of business we have is to elect a vice president. So a couple of things before we can get started. Our board policy currently requires that we use paper ballots, and since we are in a COVID situation, I'd like to suggest that somebody move to use policy 151.3 to suspend that policy, and instead of paper ballots, opt for Google Forms if that's necessary. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, if there's no question, would somebody like to put forward a motion to waive policy and waive the paper ballot policy and opt instead for using Google Forms?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Oh. Aye.
All right, any opposed? Okay, sorry, my phone did a weird thing. Okay, so motion passes there. So now, just looking through. Okay, so just a quick description. According to policy 141.2, the duties of vice president are that they should preside over all board meetings in the absence of the president and have all the powers and duties of the president during his or her or their absence or incapacity. There's an encouragement of non-attendees to attend conferences and to perform other duties as may be required by law or assigned by the board. One thing I want to take an opportunity to point out, because I don't think our board has really practiced this in the past, the president is not allowed to participate in debates and needs to remain impartial. So in the event that the president wants to participate in debate, the vice president would need to preside over that item until a vote is completed. So just kind of a call to attention for that, because I don't think that's something that we've paid attention to as a board the last several years. So having said that, I will take nominations if anybody's interested in making one for the office of vice president.
I have a question before we do nominations. Is it possible to hold more than one board position? So for example, if you are already serving as the treasurer or the clerk, et cetera, are you able to be nominated for vice president?
No, you are not. So if somebody who's currently holding an office were nominated and elected into that office, we would hold another election. We'd have to do it at a different meeting because we didn't publicly notice it. Thanks for that question. Any other questions?
Is there already like a Google form that's like kind of like templated already where Michelle would just have to put in like, so just like say person A and then person B and then you just select, or or we don't have a template yet?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Board Member Anderson. We are ready to go. If we have more than one person interested in Vice President, we are ready to go with the Google form so we can vote right now if we need to. Thank you.
Board President, I nominate myself.
All right, we have Board Member Levy. Are there any other nominations? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I guess I don't have to ask if you accept the nomination since you nominated yourself, but just for the record, do you accept that nomination, Board Member Levy?
I do. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Good to hear. So are there other nominations?
I nominate John Wong.
Board Member or Clerk Wong, do you accept that nomination?
Yes, I will.
All right. We have 2 nominations on the table. Are there other nominations? Are there other nominations at this time? Okay, so at this time, if there are no other nominations, we're going to vote, and it will be an anonymous vote. So Ms. Shope, I know I made you a collaborator on that Google form, so I'm going to close my copy of it. And here we go. So Ms. Shope, do you want to just email that out to all the board members?
Yes.
Why, thank you. All right. So at this time, if everybody could please, I'll just, for the record, while we're opening our email, state that State Statute 1988, Parent 1, 980, gosh, I can't speak. Statute 1988, Parent 1 indicates that we are allowed to use a secret ballot for board officer elections. The Google form is not going to collect email addresses, but people smarter than us, it might, be traceable since it's not like a piece of paper. So I just want to make everybody aware of that, but we are not formally tracking who is voting for whom. So once Ms. Shope receives 6 votes, she'll let us know what the outcome is. Any questions? Okay.
Vice President, sorry,
Yeah.
President Miller?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see the email already?
I don't see it yet, no.
No, Ms. Shope has not sent it out yet.
That's okay.
right.
We'll give it a moment.
All right,
Cool.
thank you.
No, thank you.
She just sent it now,
I
so
just
you
got
should
it.
be seeing.
Okay, I currently have 6 votes in, and I have 3 votes for John Wong and 3 votes for Amy Levy.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to need a little advice about how we proceed to, is it another vote?
Correct.
So just a clarification before we move on, if we take the vote again and we end up with the same outcome, I'm not quite sure how to proceed with that. Do we need to kind of take a moment and check any kind of documentation for how we handle that circumstance?
I can give you my historical context from attending other board meetings where there was a tie vote. You give an opportunity for each candidate to share why they are seeking that position, and limited to a certain time limit based on board president's preference, and then revote if it's still a tie. Then we would give another opportunity until the tie is broken.
Okay, so at this time, so board member Levy, we'll start with you since you were nominated first. Do you want to give us kind of like a spiel about why we should vote for you for vice president, and then board member, Clerk Wong, would you like to go next? Does that sound okay?
That sounds like something fun to participate in, but if we could check Robert's rules, I know that Dr. Kieser has seen that done before, but if there is a formal way that we decide on voting or deciding of a tie vote, I would definitely like for us to stick to Robert's rules.
I will run and get that copy.
I'm waiting to hear back. Sorry, just a moment. All right, so on advisement from our legal counsel, the comment is on the vice president elections, you just have to keep working out until you get a majority. So if you're amenable to speaking, that's great. Otherwise, we can skip that and go to a revote. I'm fine either way. I think it can be up to each of you. Board Member Levy, what would you like to do?
I am fine with doing a brief, I don't know, I guess selling of myself. I think on my short time on the board, I have proven myself to be someone who is very capable, chairing the Oversight and Finance Committee and also serving on the Governance Committee. I always come to meetings prepared with well thought out questions and positions, and I think I would be an asset in the role of Vice President for the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Board Member, Clerk Wong, you want to go ahead?
As Vice President, I've actually served in that position before. I have been on the board probably, I think, the longest of any board member now. Also, I do come prepared to the meetings as well. I think I really try hard to look at everything in a very impartial manner, which I know all of us try to do that. As well, I think that yeah, I think that I have good relations with everybody on the board, but I don't know. I think that the preparation experience really bodes well. And quite honestly, I think either one of us would do a good job.
Thank you so much for that. Does anybody have any questions before we vote again? All right. So Ms. Shope, are you good to send out our survey again or our Google form again?
Yes.
Thank you. So while Ms. Shope does that, and thank you so much for that, I did just get another comment that the position remains vacant until we can fill it by majority vote. So I'm going to recommend that if this time we come back with the same results, I'm going to look for some preference and some guidance from the board about whether how many times we want to vote again, or if this is something that we need to revisit on the 26th when we've had a little more time maybe to think about our two candidates. So, but for right now, let's for sure give it one more shot, and then we'll come back to that. Okay?
It should be sent.
Thank you so much.
It says you can only fill out the form once.
We might need to just make a new one. Ms. Shope, do you want me to do that really quick?
I can do that.
Oh, you got it? Okay, cool. All right, so while we are waiting, I'm just going to bounce over here. Actually, I think we can wait. We're cool staying on this item, right, until we've voted? Okay, so we'll just take a moment.
And it has been sent.
Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any trouble? It's rejected.
I am. I'll try again.
Make sure you're doing the most recent one, the most recent one that's sent out. I'm doing the one that was sent at 6:17 p.m.
I actually received two at 6:17, so I did the first one.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have all 6 responses in, and it is a tie, 3-3.
Okay, so at this time, I just want to iterate too that Dr. Keiser was kind enough to pull from the Roberts Rules book, if no candidate receives a majority, balloting continues, retaining as candidates all who do not voluntarily withdraw. So we have a few options. We can revote, which would require another Google form. So thank you in advance, Ms. Schultz, if that's the case. We can table this postpone this and work on this either later this meeting, or we can wait until the 26th. I'll take some suggestions for discussion.
Madam President,
Yes, ma'am.
may I make a motion?
You may.
I make a motion that we postpone, am I using the correct word? Postpone this until next week. That will give everyone a week to give it a little bit more thought, and we can move ahead with our agenda this evening.
All right, are there any
Before we
amendments?
have a second, can I make a friendly amendment?
Yep.
That in the event that we need to have a clerk election, that we also post that for the next meeting so that can be handled as well.
So the motion as amended would be to postpone the vice presidential election until the January 26th board meeting, and for it to be posted, we'll just post it as board officer elections so that it would be encompassing of any other positions that may need to be posted. Are there any other amendments to that motion before we receive a second? All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. We have a motion that has been amended to request that we postpone the board officer election or elections, depending on the outcome, until the January 26th meeting, and for it to be posted in a way that it would encompass both positions. Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously, and we are moving on to item 2B. So we have to have a discussion about how we'd like to proceed with the vacancy on our board. There's, just for a little bit of background, there is a policy, it's 133, and accompanying it is 133 Rule 1 that describes how to address a vacancy and the procedure. But in short, right now we're bound by policy to to fill our board vacancy within the next 60 days. And I didn't know, I think it's March 3rd is the date it needs to be filled by. So what our options are right now is we could go about deciding on posting and following that procedure that I sent out earlier and attempting to fill that position. I will let you know that we have received interest from one community member who offered to fill the vacancy. So there's at least one person interested in the community who is not currently running for office. And then the caveat, if we do decide to fill the vacancy prior to the election, we also need to include some language, if we so choose, to not allow somebody currently running for office to fill the vacancy. So that's kind of one route. The other route to take is we could invoke policy 151.3, which is we could suspend policy 133 and leave it open until the April 6th election. So I will open this up for discussion now. If we could please use the chat box, that would be great. Yes, go ahead, please, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you. I think in light of all of the work that we have ahead of us, and the person would only be in office for approximately a month, I think our best option would be to move forward with the 6 of us.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Levy.
Similar sentiment, and just a little bit of information. One, I have a question. Whoever has the answer, feel free to respond. Is the public notice of vacancy the same as the nomination period? And you can kind of answer that at the end. If yes, I don't know how we can meet that March 3rd date because the public notice has to be open for 20 days. If the public notice and the nomination period are the same, we could run the board application posting kind of concurrently, so that would still leave us at 20 days. But then we need 3 days for the board secretary to get all the materials to the board. If it's less than 2 candidates, which I don't know if it will be or not, then we could extend it another 14 days, and then that person has 5 days to say yes and take the oath. The point is, if we fill this, I am recommending that we not do it until after we have the superintendent search resolved. And on the low end, that would be 3 weeks, and that would put us at March 11th. On the longer end, that would put us at 6 weeks, which would be April 1st. So for me, that really doesn't make sense since the election is at April 6th. So I just said all that so people can kind of have a clear understanding of what we're voting for and why.
Thank you so much for that, Board Member Levy. You're correct. If you open up to 133 Rule 1, it does say a public notice must be available for a minimum of 20 days. So you are correct. Does anybody have any other questions or responses for the points that Ms. Levy raised? Okay, so I'm just checking our chat. It sounds like, oh, I'm so sorry. Board Member Anderson, go ahead, please.
As the last two people have said about postponing, finding that next person to fill in that spot, I do agree with it because, I mean, the election is just right around the corner. We do have a lot of stuff ahead of us. And I think that we could probably handle this stuff currently with the 6 people we have. And there's no need to add on to more work.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm just checking our box here. Okay, so we've heard from Board Member Jacob, Levy, and Anderson. Board Members Wong and Delgado, did you have anything that you'd like to add before we move on? Go ahead, Board Member Wong.
I would agree as well. I mean, all the technical reasons why the time frame wouldn't work, I think that's going to make it difficult. But I think more importantly is that getting a person up to speed in just to have them come down right after the election, it's going to be, I hate to say it's going to be a big waste of time, but I think that it probably is not going to be the best use of our time.
Thank you very much for that. Board Member Delgado, do you have anything to add?
I agree with everyone's statement. I think it's better if we just hold off.
Okay, it sounds like perhaps we have consensus, and if that's the case, I'm looking for a motion to, let me just flip back and make sure I have the right policy.
I'm
Please go ahead.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
I just thought about something. So if right now we're facing the issue of not being able to elect because of split votes, can we maybe think about a way to, make it work while, we hold elections? Is there some other way that we can do a tiebreaker or something like that? Just I don't know.
Sure, no, noted. I don't, at this time, I don't believe that there's anything that allows for that in Robert's rules. But we can definitely check for that. But I have confidence in our board that we'll be able to reach a consensus one way or the other. It looks like, Board Member Levy, did you raise a hand? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I did. I think that the voting for the board vice president is a little bit different. If there were the 7 of us, in order to pass a motion, we would need 4 people. And with the 6 of us, in order to pass a motion, you still need those 4 people. So I think we're okay from that perspective.
Thank you for those comments. Does anybody else have anything to add before we accept a motion on item 2B? All right, then at this time, and I'll just remind us that Board Policy 151.3 is the suspension of policy, and we can, it allows us to waive policy in the operation of any section or sections of the Board of Education policies. It says may be temporarily suspended by a majority vote of the board members present at a regular or special meeting, which is what we are in. So would somebody like to make a motion, please?
I move that we use policy 151.3 to suspend policy which dictates that we have to fill board vacancies within 60 days.
Anybody like to amend or offer a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously, and we can move on now to item 2C. The question for 2C is, well, there's a couple of issues here. I asked that we include this on the agenda because, of course, we had a very out of ordinary meeting at our last board meeting, and there's I think we need to recognize that there are a lot of emotions and a lot of different perspectives on all of these topics that are coming up relating to the opening of schools, athletics, et cetera. And since we are voting on athletics and extracurriculars at our next business meeting on the 26th, it seemed prudent to schedule a public hearing ahead of time, which would then create a space for community members, parents, everybody involved and interested to have, without intense time pressure and at a reasonable time of day, to voice their perspectives. So my suggestion was that we follow the same guidelines in policy 187, which is our public comment policy, which has been adjusted for COVID to allow us to read emails aloud. So if we could pick a date or dates, I suppose, probably sometime this weekend, and publicly notice that we would do like a public hearing. It would just be like, thank you for your comment, next comment, please. It would be televised and recorded, or at least recorded, so that board members who aren't able to be present can review that and have plenty of time to review that before the meeting on Tuesday. So the first item that part of 2C that we have to resolve is, do we want to do this, and if so, when? And before we open up that discussion, I want to point out then, once we publicly notice that, we'd have the option then to include a notice that maybe we are limiting public comment at the board business meetings to something like 20 to 30 minutes or something, as long as the opinion that I got from legal was that as long as we let people know ahead of time that that's fine, which I think under the circumstances, usually I'm not in favor of limiting public opinion or public comment, but I think we need to be able to hear the plan for athletics and extracurriculars and be able to vote on it. So at this time, I'll take questions and comments, and it looks like Board Member Wong. Go ahead, please.
A couple of questions. One comment, one question. First of all, I think that we have to recognize, and I think that our board meetings are board meetings, and we are put in the role we have the roles and responsibilities that we have to conduct. And I think, while I appreciate public comment, I think it's an important part, we are elected to be board members and do our duties. And I feel as though if we are breached because of I'm going to use a filibuster situation, I don't think that's right, and I think that I think it's not appropriate. The other question that I would have would be in regards to if we did limit it to 30 minutes or 20 minutes or however long, how would we choose the individuals that would be? Is it a first come, first served basis?
That's an excellent question, and it is a question that I've already put to legal, and we're getting a formal opinion on at some point in the very near future, but I would imagine that it would be first come, first served, because in a non-COVID situation, that's what we would do. I also just want to point out that we wouldn't be doing a phone call thing. It would be like you can send an email. So we're talking about two different things. So at the actual board meeting, you can still show up and speak or send an email. For the public hearing, however, I'm open to setting up a phone call, email, or show up in person and speak situation. Because like I said, that would be the only thing that we'd be doing, and it would be specifically for that purpose. Did you have any other thoughts or questions before I go on?
No, it's good. Thank you.
No, thank you for that very much. Are there any, I don't see anything in the chat box. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this? Okay. It sounds like Board Member Jacobs followed by Board Member Delgado. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to echo Board Member Wong's words. It's very difficult to conduct board business at 2 in the morning. I am always open to public comment, but I think that we do need to, I like this idea that's presented because I think it still gives that opportunity. But again, we were elected as officials, and I want to make the best decision for our community. For me personally, and I'm sure every board member, I'm just speaking for myself, but I will make much better decisions when it's at a certain time of day rather than the wee hours of the morning. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your comments. Board Member Delgado?
I'm just inquiring clarification. So you're saying doing the public hearing prior to the actual board meeting? And then within the board meeting, we will still allow certain time? Do we have like a limited time during the board meeting to still hear out more public comment?
Yes, thank you very much for that clarification. That's exactly what we're proposing. We just want to be prepared and kind of proactive and say, okay, so like this date from this time to this time will be the formal public hearing on the topic of extracurriculars and athletics. So anybody could show up, write in, or call in, assuming we can get that set up for that designated period of time, which would be a time ahead of on a different day prior to our meeting on the 26th. Then at the meeting on the 26th, we would still have public comment listed on the agenda, but at the same time that we notice the public about the public hearing, we would also notice the public that public comment on the business at the business meeting on Tuesday, January 26th will be limited to, 20 minutes or whatever the board decides, and it will be taken on a first come, first served basis. That does not stop anybody from emailing us individually or emailing all of us, and we can absolutely still hear all of those things. It would just limit their ability to have their comments spoken or heard aloud on Tuesday. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and maybe for Tuesday, if we're setting a time limit, if we can set up a time limit too of when emails would be received as well, I think that would provide more of a structure, and it would be more workable for board members and also for the community.
I agree, and I think the standard for city council meetings is everything has to be submitted in writing by noon the day of. So I don't know, I would look to Ms. Shope for guidance on that. Ms. Shope, I know we have other comments waiting, but Ms. Shope, do you have an opinion or a suggestion to respond to Ms. Delgado's point?
We basically had chosen a half an hour before the meeting for any comments to be submitted just so that they weren't lost in the shuffle when they were being submitted via email. I think it would be totally up to the board to determine what time they would want public comments submitted via email, or what time you would want the cutoff to be if they were going to be in person, whether you would take them up to by the time the meeting is called to order, or whether they could be still filling them out as they walk in the door. I think the board needs to make that decision and make it perfectly clear if you're going to do like the hearing and then have the limited time during the board meeting.
Thank you for that. And just a point of clarification, is there a separate email address that we should notice the public that we're using, or should they still email you?
Following the meeting on Tuesday the 12th, I did ask that we have a public comment email set up, so it would be public-comment@sdb.k12.wi.us. And if the board agrees with that, we can then start advertising that instead of having it come to my email like it has in the past. That way they'll all be in one email together that I can access for the public comment and won't have to worry about missing anybody's email.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So just a quick summarize before we go on to the next comments. What's on the table right now is the board can vote today to make a decision about how to proceed with a public hearing, and encompassed in that decision within the notice of that public hearing could be directions for the procedures of how to deal with public comment differently for the upcoming meeting on the 26th. So this is kind of like a multi-layered issue, so I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And it looks like Board Member Levy, followed by Board Member Jacobs.
So I would just like to request clarity. So public comment was likened to a filibuster, and I just want to make sure that we're clear about the language that we're using, because the definition of filibuster is to obstruct progress. And I don't see how public comment obstructs our progress. But if there's a different perspective, I would love to hear that.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Board Member, did anybody want to respond before I go on to Board Member Jacobs? Okay, so hearing none, I'm just going to move on to Board Member Jacobs' comment. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I have a question. Well, for the public, if we go ahead and do the public hearing, will we have any services for our folks that are Spanish speaking only?
That is a great question. And so the intention would be to have an interpreter there like we did for the public comment section, section of the meeting on the 12th. And later on, and actually our next agenda item is going to cover that topic in a more comprehensive way. But for right now, does that answer your question, Board Member Jacobs?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No, that's a great question. So since there are a couple different layers to this, first I want to just check in with everybody and make sure nobody else needs to clarify anything before we move on. So before we do anything about procedures and notices, first I'm curious if there is if there are board members that would maybe like to offer up a date or dates and a time range. And originally, based on the information and feedback that we've received in the past, in a pre-COVID situation, I know people really liked Sunday afternoons. Dr. Kieser pointed out to me that the Packers play at 2:05 on Sunday, so I don't know if that's going to play a role in in how we choose that. And I will just say that personally, I can make myself available for like 4-hour blocks of time as needed this weekend, and we do not need every board member present. So would anybody like to make a recommendation about a day or date or time?
I am okay with Sunday as well. I'm probably going to get dinged for saying this, but I am not a football fan. Sorry.
That is okay. So Sunday afternoon, did you have a time range in mind, Board Member Delgado?
Maybe after 2 p.m. would be fine with me.
Okay, thank you so much, Board Member Levy.
Just a quick question. Do we need to have a period of public notice of this before we can actually have the event? And if so, how long is that period?
That's a great question. Please correct me, but I don't think that there's a prescribed period for public notice, but we are legally required to notice with at least 24 hours in advance. I'd like to just do it with as much time as possible.
You are correct.
Yeah, and my only concern with that is that, the reason for doing this is so that everyone can feel like they have been heard and we can possibly not take up a huge chunk of a board meeting. So I just want to make sure that people have enough time to gather their thoughts and make their submission.
Thank you so much for that. That's a great point and something that absolutely has to be top of mind. So I'm hopeful that we can get this decided tonight. And then hopefully, Dr. Kieser, do you think Ms. Christopa would be able to send out information maybe first thing in the morning? We can get that on our website and maybe do like a Blackboard blast kind of thing?
Yes, once the date and time has been determined, I'll work to get that communication out.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Board Member Levy, does that address your question, concern?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Would anybody like to offer a time or a date different than Sunday at 2 p.m. or after 2 p.m.?
Excuse me, President Miller. I actually have two questions. Are we using our raise our hand or the chat box or both?
We are using the chat box, and I see that I overlooked one of your question marks, and I apologize.
It's okay. No problem. That's why I just was asking for clarification. No problem. So what time do the Packers play on Sunday?
2:05.
I am, along with Board Member Delgado, I'm not a football fan, though I am rooting for the Packers, for those of you listening, because I am a Wisconsinite. However, in fairness to all our Packer fans, as my sister-in-law just informed me today, because I was not aware, this is a very important game, since this will decide if they go to the Super Bowl or not. So I think we'd probably have more input on a Saturday than a Sunday, unless we can totally avoid the Packer game time. And I'm just speaking as a football fan.
No, that's totally fine. So we can do, I would just say, are there any, and I'll take Board Member Anderson's input, but does anybody have any objections outside of the Packer game to doing it on a Saturday or a Sunday? Okay, so we're going to go with Board Member Anderson and then Board Member Delgado. Go ahead, please.
I just want to say, Stephanie, we all know Packers are very important in Wisconsin, and you probably won't find very many people wanting to miss that game.
Thank you very much for that, Board Member Anderson. Board Member Delgado.
I am willing to make it work at any time, so I will free up my morning if that's what needs to be done for Pecker's sake.
Thank you. And we've talked entirely too much about football for my preference, so I'm going to move on to, can we reach a consensus about doing it on Saturday? Like, are there any, please voice now if you have an objection to finding a time on Saturday.
I am not available on Saturday.
Okay. So the only objection would be that Board Member Delgado is not available on Saturday. Those of us who are okay on Saturday, is there a preferred time on Saturday?
Board Member Levy has a question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was trying to hit the button and I accidentally shared my screen, I think, for a moment. So my apologies. Board Member Levy and then Board Member Wong.
I would just like to throw out there Saturday from like 1 to 4.
Thank you very much for that. Board Member Wong, please.
The afternoon on Saturday would work fine. I have a conflict on Saturday morning.
It sounds like both Board Members Levy and Wong would be okay with 1 to 4, or you're okay with that, Board Member Wong? And then Board Member Anderson, go ahead, please.
I'd be available more in the evening since I have to work during the day. So probably anytime after 4 on Saturday.
Okay. Board Member Levy, would you be okay with like 2 to 5?
That's fine.
Okay, that way, Board Member Anderson, so we're going to record it, but that way if you wanted to be part of it for like an hour or so, like that would maybe, that's a good compromise perhaps. I guess at this point, I would take, it sounds like we're reaching consensus, so I would take a motion, I don't know that we need a motion, but let's just make one anyway, to establish a firm date and time before we go on with like the details of noticing and how we'll handle the public comment on the 26th. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that the board set up a community listening session for Saturday. Let me grab the date. For Saturday, January 23rd from 2 to 5 to focus on the topics of athletics and extracurricular activities.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. And then I just want to clarify before we vote that voting for this does not obligate you to attend. We just need really even just one person. I think it would be ideal to have 2 to 3 people attend for all or part of the time. So it's okay to vote for this even if you can't be there. Is there any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so at this time, we're going to proceed with the community. I mean, we can call it, I don't think it really matters what we call it, but I just want to clarify, we're going to follow the same guidelines as 187. So we are there to listen. We're not going to engage in a discussion. We're going to thank people for their comments. We can answer like quick questions, I think, which is prescribed in 187, but mostly it's just going to be kind of like what it was like on the 12th. Is that cool with everybody before we move on to the next item?
And you would like to have translation or interpretation services for that time as well, correct?
Yeah, so so going on to the logistics, so we would definitely need an interpreter. It would be ideal if it could be broadcasted, but it definitely needs to be recorded, just, for transparency, and that way board members who aren't able to attend for the whole time or at all are able to get those comments. Dr. Keiser, do you see any issues with that? And then I'll take board member Wong's question.
I just wanted a clarification, so I'll work with our teaching and learning department to get an interpreter for 2 to 5. I will say that it'll most likely be someone to help interpret if we have any families who are Spanish speaking who would like to address the board. and then we would work on doing the interpretation and putting it out on a recording at a later date.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on anything Dr. Keiser just shared before I move on to Board Member Wong's question? Okay, thank you much. Go ahead, Board Member Wong.
Okay, if we have set aside a 3-hour time window, does that mean that we're committed to the 3 hours, and or if the comments come in and it goes beyond that, are we taking them, or is there a timeline that we're going to cut it off?
Thank you. That's a great question. I would say that if people, what we'll do is after the meeting concludes, Ms. Schoper, I will send out like a sign up, and I will just say right now, like I can cover any of the time. So for sure we'll have somebody there. So sign, if you can only be there for an hour, that's great. If you be there the whole time, that's great. Last year when we did a listening session, we had it at a set time. I think it ended like at 4, and we ended up, there was a few more comments. We hung out to like 4:15. So I would say that we're going to stick to the time that we, within reason. So like we'll be out of there by 5:30, I'm sure. But I'll stay along and make sure everything's torn down and everything is cool. So, okay, so we have 2 to 5 on January 23rd. We talked about interpretation, broadcasting, and recording. Are there any other practical questions about what would need to happen on Saturday before we move on to the procedure on for the board meeting at the 26th? All right, thank you so much for that. When we notice this, like when the blast goes out, we also want to include, like to Board Member Levy's point, we need to give people a heads up about what to prepare for. So like even some of our board members can't even be there on Saturday, so we know that not everybody is going to be able to attend or participate on Saturday. That's realistic. And so we do want to leave public comment open. It is part of the business meeting agenda, but for the sake of the occasion, we're going to limit it. So I will take a recommendation for for the amount of time and any language that you feel is necessary to include in that public notice that will go out about Saturday and how things will be a bit different on Tuesday. Oh, please go ahead, Dr. Keiser.
Did you, for Saturday, did you just want to limit it to in-person and email for Saturday, or did you want to include another option?
I am fine with doing a phone call situation for the public hearing piece on Saturday, but I would like to eliminate it for the Tuesday public comment going forward, because I believe it prioritized unfairly people who are on the phone versus people who took the time to write in or people who took the time to show up. And I think it was very complicating, although I'll take other board members' opinions on that. Is everybody okay with doing a phone on Saturday, but not anymore at the meeting? I think Board Member Levy was going to speak first, I think, and then Board Member Wong.
Thank you. No, I agree with having the phone available for Saturday, but then not having it available for Tuesday. And I would also like for us to make clear, because some people want for us to hear their concerns, but they don't necessarily have to have it read for public comment. So I would just make it clear to people that they can always email us. And then I think that will cut down on the emails that people feel may need to be read in public.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm hopeful that the public comment email address will help clarify that, but we will include that absolutely in the notice. Dr. Keiser, does that make sense for what we should put in there? Okay. So yes. We'll touch base before we send something out. Board Member Levy will definitely make sure that that's in there. Thank you so much for that. I can't remember who was next. I think it was Board Member Wong. Go ahead, please.
I would suggest that we hold the public comment at the meeting on the 26th to 30 minutes. And also, I'm curious to know if we are going to, when we're going to start accepting those as far as the first come, first serve. And then if it's going to be by the emails or if it's going to be when they come into the meeting in person.
That's a great question. I think people can send an email once we announce that public comment email. The way that it works with other, like municipality or the county, is like you can send an email anytime, but the cutoff is noon. I think to be fair to people who take the time to show up, I would recommend us alternating between email and in person until the time runs out based on the date that they sent it in, like the earliest first, but that's just a recommendation. Does anybody else have thoughts on that? I mean, Board Member Wong, do you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share since you brought it up?
No, I like that idea. I think it's fair specifically for the people that do show up. At least it gives them an opportunity, and they know that you need to get the meeting early if you're going to want to speak.
Are there any other opinions on that before we check with Ms. Shope or Dr. Keiser? Okay, go ahead. Board Member Levy.
I just have a question. So I agree with everything that has been said. No phone call during the meeting, but yes, have it during Saturday as a public hearing. I am comfortable with 30 minutes, but my question is, what if someone has a public comment that is not related to extracurricular? So if you come in person, do they still fill out those cards and give them to Secretary topics that they want to speak on, that should be separate from the 30 minutes for sports and extracurriculars?
That is a great point, and I think that if I was going to defer to Ms. Shope to find out if you're okay accepting cards to a certain time. To give you a moment, how does the board feel about prioritizing comments unrelated to athletics and extracurriculars since they will have already had the opportunity on Saturday? Is that something that we want to do, or is it like Board Member Levy pointed out, is it just like it's all in with the mix? Do you have a suggestion for how you'd like to see it done before we act?
Oh, I would just say do the 30 minutes for athletics and extracurriculars. And then, I don't think that there'll be 20 things for other issues, but to also read those. So I'm envisioning hopefully that'll just be like another 10, 15 minutes, if that.
Would you be comfortable with like a not to exceed certain amount of time language attached to that?
I would.
Do you have a recommendation for the number of minutes? So if we decide, if we make a motion to do 30 minutes of public comment related for email or in person on Tuesday the 26th related to athletics and extracurriculars, and then whatever amount of time you'd like to put forward not to exceed or whatever, we could vote on that.
For issues separate than athletics and extracurriculars, I would cap it at maybe 15 minutes and then some caveat where there is no yielding of the time, because that way we would have time for up to 5 additional comments.
And then just to clarify, Board Member Levy, if somebody needs an interpreter, they do get 6 minutes of public comment. Okay, so just to make sure that was clear. Okay, thank you so much. That's a great suggestion. Lots of great suggestions tonight. Board Member Wong, go ahead, please.
I would agree as well. I was going to bring that up as far as 3 minutes per person, except for, of course, for an interpreter.
All right, so it sounds like before we move or get any further discussion, I want to check in with Ms. Shope. Ms. Shope, what makes the most sense to you? Would you need to cut off public comment cards in person, maybe by the start of the meeting, or what is going to work best for you logistically for what we're discussing here for Tuesday, for the in-person comments?
Personally, I feel it'd be easiest if the cutoff time was the start of the meeting at 7, like when you call the meeting to order, because it's difficult for me to be taking minutes and conducting my portion of the meeting, like doing roll call on that, when people are approaching me with their cards and questions and such. So if we said that the cards have to be turned in by the start of the meeting, by the time the meeting is called to order, that would be my preference. I'm not opposed to if somebody's standing there and filling out the card to them handing it to me. But if somebody's walking in at 7:15 and trying to hurry up and fill out a card, I think that would be more difficult to accept and do. But again, it's totally up to you guys. I'm here to serve and do what you guys need done. So I'm just telling you what I feel would be easiest for me while I'm trying to also do my job as the board secretary.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much for that. Are there board members or Dr. Keiser, would anybody like to share any different thoughts than what Ms. Shope just recommended? Please go ahead, Board Member Levy.
Can we get Secretary Shope an assistant for the evening, maybe to handle cards? Because if someone takes the time, especially in a pandemic, to show up for a meeting, but I'm also sensitive to Secretary Shope's needs that I don't want to be trying to do 10 things at once. So if we could get Secretary Shope an assistant for that evening to handle cards, I think that might be a fix.
I can do that.
Is that okay?
for the 26th, I can do that.
All right, fantastic. So it sounds like that's a possibility. If that's the case, would we just accept public comment then until the beginning of public comment at whatever time that is, or throughout the duration of public comment, given that there's still time for people to participate in the allotted time?
Could you restate that?
Yes. No, I'm sorry. It's been a long day, and I'm not sure I found the correct words there, so my apologies. If, for example, we receive like 5 emails and 3 people show up in person and it doesn't take up the whole 30 minutes, if somebody else came along with someone, there's still 12 minutes left on the clock, can somebody then fill out a public comment card to then speak? Would we be okay with that scenario?
Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for clarifying. So just to quick summarize, what I have written down is that what we're discussing. Oh, and because we haven't brought it up yet, but I'm also curious if we can. And again, this is going to come with our next agenda item. But would it be possible to get a translator there for public comment on the 26th?
Yes, I'll work on both Saturday and for the 26th.
I appreciate that. Okay, so it sounds like with an interpreter, we are circling the idea of being open to limiting public comment on the subject of athletics and extracurriculars to 30 minutes based on emails sent to the public comment email address by noon, or I can't remember if we picked a time yet. Did we pick a time yet?
For Saturday, you're saying?
We're on to Tuesdays. I think we're cool
Tuesday.
For Saturday. So on Tuesday, okay, so at a time to be clarified, at some point we're cutting off when people are able to send emails and they're able to be read aloud on Tuesday the 26th. The amount of time for that would be 30 minutes. We would alternate between emails in order that they're received versus in-person public comment cards in order that they're received. And then after that 30 minutes is up, we would set aside 15 minutes for other in-person or emailed public comments on any other topics or agenda items as appropriate. And we are allowing people to submit in-person comments on the comment card ongoing throughout the time that it's appropriate throughout the meeting, because we are going to secure an assistant for Ms. Shope.
Correct. And I would say as far as emails are concerned, we can draw a line on when we conclude the work on Saturday. That can be one group of emails that get forwarded to all board members from the public comment email address, and then we would take the emails from that Saturday afternoon forward as emails for the Tuesday 26th.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Board Member Levy and then Ms. Shope.
Are we interested in adding that for this, that people are not, because we have that 30-minute time slot, that we won't have a yielding of the time? So like I yield my 3 minutes and now they have 6?
I apologize for overlooking that in my notes. I am fine with that if other board members have an opinion. Are we all okay with people not yielding time during that 30-minute time? Just for the 26th. Okay, so we might have to, in our motion, we may have to make a motion to waive policy on that as well, because I believe that is written into our board policy, 187 for public comment. So just keep that in mind when we make our motion. Did you have another question or thought before we move on to the show? You're good? Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Shope?
My clarification is if you're setting aside 30 minutes for anybody that has comments or emails for the athletic portion, and then another, you said 15 minutes for any other topic, what if the athletic portion doesn't take the 30 minutes? Are we going to sit for 30 minutes and wait?
That is a beautiful question, and my intention was no, once we had received, once those comments were exhausted, we would move on. So it would be like up to 30 minutes and not, here's our 30 minutes.
Okay.
That's a great clarification, so let's make sure we state that properly. Thank you for that. Did you have anything else that you'd like to add, Ms. Shope?
No, that was just my only concern.
Okay, no, perfect. So it sounds like we are, any email that's received into the public comment line at like 5:01 p.m. on Saturday, I should say public comment email that's received at 5:01 p.m. Saturday the 23rd up until, did we say noon Tuesday the 26th?
Correct.
Okay, so that's a lot of items. So Ms. Shope, I don't know if you've had a chance to write all that down. I guess what we could do is somebody could make a motion to waive policy 187 just for the Tuesday the 26th board meeting and to adopt the procedures for Tuesday as discussed. But I want to check in first with Ms. Shope to make sure that you have all that down. Do you need us to repeat anything?
It might be good just to, in the motion, like waive policy 181 or 187, and then kind of like bullet point the key points that you have, like the timeframes or the deadlines, just so that it's all in writing. So if anybody questions it, we have that laid out.
That sounds good. Would anybody like to make that motion?
I would move that we waive policy 187 for the board meeting on Tuesday, January 26th, and allow for the public comment to extend specifically for the athletic and extracurriculars for 30 minutes, and receive those alternate between those that are in person and those that email beginning on Saturday, January 23rd, starting at 5 o'clock up until, did we say noon on the 26th of January?
I second.
You'll want to include the no yield.
So we have a motion and a second. So do we want to we'd have to make an amendment in addition. You did a great job, Board Member Wong, but in addition to that, can we offer an amendment just to fill in the gaps there? We'll vote on the amendment first and then on Board Member Wong's original motion. What we're missing from that motion was just, like Dr. Kieser pointed out, waiving the 3-minute yield, as well as providing 15 minutes for comments on other topics. Did I miss anything?
For President Miller?
Yes, Board Member Levy.
Just clarifying that if an interpreter is needed, that 3 minutes will be 6 minutes, so that's not confused with the yielding of the time.
Thank you very much for that clarification. It's a really important point. So would somebody like to amend Board Member Wong's motion to include those points, and then we'd vote on that and then his original motion? Am I able to make the motion?
I'll help.
No, go ahead.
I move that we bring the just stated amendment to Board Member Wong's motion to the floor for a vote.
Ms. Shope, before we get a second on that, Ms. Shope, does that cover it for you?
Yes.
Beautiful, thank you. Is there a second for Board Member Levy's amendment?
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second for friendly amendment to the motion. Any discussion on the amendment before we vote? Okay, at this time, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the amendment passes unanimously. We have a motion and a second on Board Member Wong's original motion. Is there any additional discussion? Other than I'll just thank you and Board Member Levy for putting that all out there together so nicely. All right, all in favor of Board Member Wong's original motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we have, that has passed unanimously, and I think that Dr. Kieser, I'll follow up with you and Ms. Shope after the meeting just to make sure we have ducks in a row, and then I'll send a communication out to board members as well, just kind of summarizing how we're going to move forward, if everybody's okay with that. Is that, Dr. Kieser, did you have anything to add before we go on to item 2D?
No, thank you.
No, thank you very much. So item 2D, separate from the discussion of translation at the public comment section for board meetings, WASB is hosting a community and staff forum for our superintendent search on Monday the 25th. Information for that is going out to the community, I believe, tomorrow morning. It'll be in the format of a Zoom webinar, and there will be 3 different sections. Presumably, we'll have 3 different candidates rotating between sections with little breaks. So the question was raised about translation, and since WASB does not have translation available, I asked that we include this on the agenda to talk about approving a board budget expense, like so the board would pay for translation for this event on the 25th. And I would need somebody to offer up like a not to exceed amount. Translation is $40 an hour, and it was recommended, let me just double check that I have the right number. I think it was recommended that we do maybe like a not to exceed $1,200 just to be on the safe side for Monday the 25th. And the other issue that has come up is, do we want this to be like interpreted in the Zoom meeting? So we're all in the Zoom meeting together and every comment then is interpreted, or do we want there to be 2 separate Zoom webinars so that if you primarily need it in Spanish, you would go to the one that's primarily in Spanish and you would just hear it all interpreted. So those are the 2 kind of items that we need to deal with for item 2D. Any thoughts? Yes, Board Member Delgado, please.
I think that that's an excellent idea, and I can understand why this would be out of a separate budget, because I think our staff are not hired to do that kind of thing. I think it would be wise for us to look at a permanent translator to be able to do the job of translating a lot of other documents and translating our meetings. I mean, that's my ultimate goal. Hopefully that, can be accomplished at, sometime in the future. But I think that this is an excellent idea, and I wouldn't be opposed to voting in favor of this.
Thank you very much. And just to clarify, were you in favor of the 1 Zoom meeting or the 2 Zoom meetings?
I think if you're it kind of depends, because if you're able to translate while they're, speaking, it's going to be, I think it's going to be transmittable to the Zoom meeting at that moment. But if you're translating the whole meeting in a separate Zoom meeting, so I'm good either way as long as there's some translation available. I think it's probably more proper to have it right there at the place so that it can be transmittable at the moment than waiting for translations to be done after the fact.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying, and I appreciate the sentiments. Board Member Levy.
Thank you. I have a question. So we're talking about, one, I'm in favor of having a translator all the time. But for the purpose of the discussion now, are we just talking about the WASB candidate forum on the 25th?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so if I'm understanding it correctly, you said not to exceed $1,200 with $40 an hour. That's 30 hours.
So that was the recommendation that we got from admin, and at $40 an hour, I'm not sure if we need multiple translators or what the thinking of that was, but Dr. Kieser, did you want to speak to that?
Certainly. So it's $40 an hour per person, and typically in 15 to 20-minute segments, depending on the volume of interpretation, they need to switch out interpreters. So depending on how long the overall forum is and how many of the questions are, including the concurrent interpretation. So i.e., similar to what we had last week, we had continuous translation on a separate YouTube channel, as opposed to a person speaking and then pausing, allowing interpretation, and then having a pause for the interpreter in there. So there are a couple of factors, and we aimed high, knowing that we probably will not exceed that at all, but we didn't want to fall short.
Quick question for clarification. So if I am a translator and I'm working in 15-minute increments, and there's 4 of us. I believe that's the number that Dr. Kuser gave. So that means I'm working 15 minutes an hour. So in order to get my $40 an hour, am I being paid for when I'm not translating, when it's someone else's turn?
If we do not have our own staff doing it, we contract with an outside firm and they contract us for the time that they're on site. So whether they're actively translating or in between, they're charging us for the time they're on site.
Okay, perfect. So, and you said so 4 translators an hour. Do we have an idea of how long that event on the 25th is going to last? Because I don't think it's going to go past 3-4 hours, right?
It's going to be approximately 4 hours. It's right now it's scheduled from about 4:30 to 8:30, give or take. To Board Member Wong's point earlier, sometimes it kind of runs over a little bit. So let's even say like 4.5 hours. Okay, perfect. So I would just throw out there for discussion, I just did 4 translators times 4 hours times $40 is $640. So I would be more comfortable with not to exceed $700, and I would be in favor of having 2 YouTube channels. So native English speakers are not waiting, native Spanish speakers are not waiting. Everyone gets it in their native language in real time. Thank you very much for that point, Board Member Levy, and then Board Member Jacobs, please.
Just a quick clarification. I believe I've heard 2 different amounts. Is it 20 per hour or 40 per hour?
40 per hour. Thank you. All right. So it sounds like Board Member Levy has put forward that she would be comfortable with a not to exceed $700 figure, and Board Members Levy and Delgado seem amenable to doing 2 separate so that there can be continuous translation. Is that what I'm hearing? Or does anybody else have any opinion on that? Okay, so at this time, we can work out Ms. Shope and Ms. Christopa and Dan Nerad can kind of we can all kind of hammer out the details, I think, of how that's logistically going to work on Monday, but it sounds like we have enough information at this point to move forward with a motion to approve the board purchasing translation services for Monday the 25th in an amount not to exceed $700. Would somebody like to make a motion at this time?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion at this time?
Just one point of discussion. Are we okay with doing the 2 separate YouTube channels? Do we have consensus?
I'm fine with it.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, does any other board members want to weigh in on that?
I'm just fine with doing 2 separate Zoom meetings.
So just to clarify, Ms. Shope, I just want to check in with you because that's a little out of my lane, and I want to make sure I'm understanding and representing correctly. So I know that WASB is responsible for setting up the Zoom webinars. So that's going to depend on WASB setting up duplicate webinars. Is that right?
My understanding is yes. They would have to set up like 3 webinars, one for the staff, one for the public, and a second one for the public. That would be where we would do the Spanish interpretation.
Okay, that sounds good. So provided that WASB is able to do that, we are, though, set up technologically to offer the 2 YouTube channels like we did last week. Is that correct?
Yes, because what they would do is provide the Zoom links, and then we would put those links out there for people to sign up and enter into. So they'd be like webinars through Zoom.
Perfect. Okay, so what the board and the district are able to control is the YouTube channel, and what WASB is able to control is the Zoom webinar. So I will reach out momentarily and send that communication to Dan Urad and tell him that we need a 3rd Zoom webinar that will be just for the concurrent translation. Just to make sure I use the right terminology there. So with because I heard people say Zoom and YouTube, and it's 2 separate things, but it sounds like the district and the board are equipped to do that, and we'll just double check with WASB. That's a great point. Are there any other questions or discussion before we vote on the $700 for translation on Monday the 25th? Okay, so hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. And the last item is 2E. Previously, we had discussed allowing, just like we did for our interim superintendent search, allowing community members to submit questions for the final round interview. So if we're going to do that, then we need a time in open session to select those questions. Currently, the district was kind enough to send out a Blackboard blast on Friday, letting people know how to access the link to submit a question. If anybody in the audience here is listening, you can go to the superintendent search page, and on the left menu bar, there's an option to submit a question, and you can submit one, and we'll look at it. So that has been suggested by the district then to close on the 26th. At which point we could take the time, we could send all of the questions out to board members at the time that that survey closes, and then we could reconvene in open session, potentially, if we'd like to, which is what we're discussing, on sometime on Wednesday to select our final round interview questions. So I'm open to any discussion on that. Who would like to start?
Board Member Jacobs put in a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that was new.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Dr. Kieser. No, I was just going to start the discussion. I'm personally available Wednesday evening at any time that works for my colleagues on the board that work.
Thank you very much. Board Member Levy?
Just for clarification, are we discussing whether or not we want to solicit public questions, or is the discussion when do we want to process those questions and pick our final question?
At a previous meeting presided over by our former president, we had sort of by consensus agreed that we wanted to do that. So we are soliciting questions currently from community members. So what we are looking for is a time potentially on Wednesday to select from those questions what our final interview questions will be.
Perfect, and that's Wednesday the 27th?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Board Member Levy. And I think we have Board Member Anderson. Did I see you? Or is there another question? Maybe I just saw his computer glitch on or something. Okay. So I would just recommend that if we do meet, maybe we meet Wednesday at 6 o'clock, because I know some people have some later work schedules. And since somebody brought to my attention that since we're doing this in open session, which we learned last time is the correct way to do this, that it might give an unfair advantage to some of the participants in the final round interview. So I just have a question for the board. If anybody would be in favor of, opposed to, or has any thoughts or comments on just going ahead and sending the final round interview questions to our 3 finalists ahead of time, just to make sure it's an even playing field. Any thoughts on that? Okay, Board Member Wong and then Board Member Jacobs, please.
I think that would be the only fair way to do it.
Thank you very much, Board Member Wong. Board Member Jacobs?
I absolutely agree with Board Member Wong. We have to make it fair and equitable, and I think that's the way to do it.
All right. Is there any other discussion on sending out the interview questions once we have selected them to our finalists? Board Member Levy?
No, I'm fine with sending the questions out just for clarification, and we may need to check in with Dan Nearad. But do we have a bit more leeway in the final round of interviews with our follow-up questions? So if everyone has the same set of questions, just for clarification, because I don't really remember from the last process, but do we have that ability to do on the spot, like a follow-up to the question?
Let's verify with Dan Nearad, but I've got that question written down, and then we'll clarify for you. Okay? Sound good? All right. Any other discussion to meet Wednesday, January 27th, maybe at 6 p.m. to establish our final round interview questions from the pool submitted by the community and to send those to our finalists once those are completed? Okay, with no discussion, would anybody like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Great, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All right, any opposed? Okay, so that concludes our business here under our board discussion and action items in open session. So at this time, we're going to convene into closed session, and we will be adjourning from closed session to discuss our finalists for the superintendent search. Are there any questions before we hear a motion to go into closed?
Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kieser. Have a great evening. Okay, any other discussion or questions? Okay, so at this time, I'll take a motion to go into executive session.
I'll move to convene.
I was all ready. Mr. Wong, take it away.
Go ahead.
Really? Okay. Thank you. Board Member Wong, I move to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Michelle, may I please have a roll call?
Delgado,
Aye.
Jacobs,
Aye. Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Levy.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right. Thank you very much. We can click off of here and go to the other calendar invite. Take care, everybody.
Can we take a quick break?
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, let's reconvene at 7:30 or so.
Okay.
All right, thanks.